So right now we're going to continue with publishing your music, and we're going to talk about income streams. And when we talk about income streams, first we need to talk about shares of the publishing pie. So let me go ahead and explain. All right. When you write a song, you're aware that you own the song, right? Now there's a tradition in the publishing world to call the monies that you make two different things. There is the writer's share of money, and that goes to you, the creative person that you are. And there's also the publisher's share of money, which also goes to you for being the intelligent, smart person that you are, okay? But it's still you. So you get the writer's share and the publisher's share. I mean, kind of sounds crazy, right? But that's just the way the publishing industry works, all right? Now you might be wondering, it's like, okay, so there's this publisher, and I guess now I'm the publisher, and the publisher's responsible for, I guess, doing all the work, like collecting the money and then paying the writer. It's like, I don't know if I want to do that stuff, you know? Could I sign those rights over to an established music publisher to do it for me? And the answer is yes, but we're going to talk about that later. So for now, whenever we say the word publisher, it's talking to you, okay? It's you we're talking to. All right, so now, what are the types of monies that you can get for publishing your music? Well, there's a couple of them, and we like to refer to them as the 4 food groups of music publishing. And that is, number 1, mechanical royalties. Number 2, performance royalties. Number 3, synchronization fees. And then there's also something called print royalties. Now, when all of these are used digitally online, we refer to them as electronic transmissions. And when all of these are dealing with foreign territories, we call them foreign sub-publishing income, okay? And now we're gonna tackle all of these, and we're gonna start first with mechanical royalties.
Yeehaw. All right, so, as the whole CD/PD thing that we've sort of talked about, right? Mechanical royalties tie into the first one, the C, the copy, the reproduction. So, starting back, like Bobby mentioned earlier in an earlier segment about how, the copyright law started in 1909. That started back in the day, that the main medium that existed then was piano rolls. And they were reproduced and manufactured, and then they would sort of twirl in the player pianos. And back then, that 1909 law set a 2-cent mechanical rate, so that every song earned 2 cents. Well, from 1909 up to 1978, it was 2 cents that entire time. So flash now to that big overhaul that Bobby referred to earlier, effective January 1, 1978. Well, that kicked in the steady increase coming from 2 cents, and then it was every 2 years, really, for a period of time, there was an increase. And then now we are currently at a rate we're going to talk about in a second, but it's been that way for about 10 years. Now, these mechanical royalties, I want to make sure that they are separate from artist royalties. Artist royalties, as we've kind of touched upon on the sound recording side of things, only tie into sound recording. Mechanicals are for the CD, of course, the cassette that doesn't exist anymore. We have a great resurgence in vinyl now, which is fantastic. Anytime those are mechanically reproduced, you have these mechanicals, and
they go to the writer of the song.
And to Bobby's point earlier, the current rate right now for a song that is 5 minutes or less is 9.1 cents. So it's gone from 1978 at 2 cents all the way up now to 9.1. It's been that way for the last 10 years. And it will stay this way. We're gonna be talking about in the electronic transmission section where we're getting into streaming rates, but these physical rates and digital download rates of the 9.1, half of it is the writer's share, half of it is the publisher's share, like Bobby was just talking about. And for any song that is over 5 minutes, there is a per minute calculation that happens. So again, 9.1 cents for 5 minutes or less, but as soon as you hit 5:01, you've gotten into the 6th minute. So it'll be 1.75 cents per minute for any song that is over 5 minutes or any fraction thereof,
right, exactly.
Sort of above.
Right.
But that's the way the law is set out. Now, Bobby's going to address something else.
Yeah, there's a beast. There's a
Great
beast
word for it.
of a clause found in recording agreements, okay? Which basically takes what Michael just said and kind of like, kicks it in the butt a little bit. Yeah, throws it right out, okay? Now, so what is a controlled composition clause? A controlled composition clause is a clause in a recording agreement. So now this is assuming that maybe you are a signed recording artist that sets the limit on the amount that the record company has to pay you in mechanical royalties. And you might be thinking, what? You just told us that these, mechanicals are set in law and that, according to law, they have to pay you a certain rate. And now the record company is going to make you sign something that says that they don't have to pay you that rate. Did you hear right? And the answer is yes. And, you might be asking like, well, why would I sign that? And, because you do,
It's all leverage.
Exactly, and there are some ways that you can negotiate this a little bit better, but this is generally how it works, okay? So first way that they're going to limit your mechanical royalty is they're gonna say that, you know what? There's a 5-minute rate, and that's the only one that we're gonna pay you. We are not gonna pay you if your songs go over the 5-minute. We're not gonna pay that 1.75 rate, per minute, per fraction thereof, et cetera. We're not gonna go there. It's just we're only paying the 5-minute rate. So that's one way they limit it, okay? A second way they limit it is by saying that we're only gonna pay you 75% of the statutory rate. So if you take the current rate, which is 9.1, and you times it by 75%, you are actually going to get 6.8, right? So now your song limit is down to 6.8 from 9.1, okay? Now, to further reduce it, copyright law says that they have to pay you for every song, right? But the controlled composition clause says that we're only going to pay you for a limit of 10 songs. Doesn't matter how many you have, just a limit of 10 songs. So you have 6.8 times 10, and they're saying we're only going to pay you 68 cents per record made and distributed. That is it, or per record actually sold, which is something else that we can get into too as well. But they're now only going to pay you 68 cents. So let's just say you did write 14 songs. You're going to divide 68 by 14, and now your per song rate is down to 4.9 cents. Okay? So we went from 9.1 now down to 4.9 cents. All right, now, the controlled composition clause relates to controlled compositions. What is a controlled composition? It's any song written by the artist or any song co-written with an artist and maybe a co-writer, right? But it does not apply to outside songs. So let's just say, for example, you're doing a cover. They have to pay 9.1 cents out of that actual cap, right? So if you do 2 covers, 9.1 times 2 is 18.2, and you subtract it from the 68 cents, and now you divide that by 12, the additional songs that you have on the record, now your per song rate is down to 4.0. So you've gone from 9.1 to 4.0. So you can see how this controlled composition clause actually limits your rate quite a lot. All right.
I actually have a story, if you don't mind my
Yeah, let's do
interrupting,
it.
that I
Yeah.
always love telling this story. So, years ago when MTV started, they started their Unplugged, series, and Eric Clapton was one of the first ones to be featured on MTV Unplugged. And it was a long concert, and it was a big deal when his record came out, that it was the accompanying record to his MTV Unplugged special, and I think it had even more than 14 songs, right? 17 maybe. Well, though Eric is a fantastic songwriter, many of the hits that Eric Clapton had were covers. Well, Eric Clapton was signed to Warner Brothers Records, and he was also signed to Warner Chappell, the sister company, publishing company, as a songwriter. Well, the worst extreme example of what you're talking about is so that Eric had a controlled compositions clause. I don't know the specifics, but let's say it's like your example of the 68 cent maximum, 10 songs at 75%. Well, Eric had so many covers on his record that he actually exceeded his 68 cent cap. So Warner Brothers Records it was actually contractually able to take the overage above the 68 cents and deduct it from Eric's artist royalty. So Eric was actually in a position where he was losing money every time he sold a record. And of course, Warner Chappell, as his publisher, didn't like this either because they had paid him advance, they want to recoup their money, and they're not getting paid a thing. Well, in the very long story short, they were able to take the way Eric's recording agreement defined an album that applied to the controlled compositions clause, and they were able to find a middle ground because the agreement defined the album that it would apply to as a studio album, and Warner Chappell successfully argued that it was a live record and therefore not a studio recorded record. So the two companies, who were owned by the same company, ended up coming up with a settlement between the two. But I mean, that is like the worst example I've ever heard where an artist is actually losing money every time they sell a record.
Absolutely, totally. Now you guys might be going like, right? This controlled composition clause, oh no. Well, you know, it used to really have, I think it used to be a lot more significant, maybe, maybe earlier, but maybe now it's lost a little bit of significance for a couple of reasons. Number one, there's a lot of artists out there today that are not signing record deals. They are their own record company. Mm-hmm. So there is going to be no contract. There is going to be no controlled composition clause, and you're not going to pay yourself a mechanical royalty, right? So, I mean, that's one way to look at it. The second way to look at it is essentially, with some exceptions to the resurgence on vinyl, CDs just don't sell the way that they used to, right? Records just don't sell the way that they used to, right? So that kind of brings us to the third thing, is that the controlled composition clause does not apply to digital downloads and does not apply to streaming. I bet you're happy about that, right? So that's kind of the beast known as controlled composition clauses that exist in recording agreements. When we talk about mechanical royalties, Michael, we talk about actually controlled composition clauses, Harry Fox kind of comes into the picture again, HFA. Sure. And maybe you can just kind of talk to us a little bit more about, essentially like what they do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. But Harry Fox Agency is an agent for publishers in this area of mechanical rights. And for years, it was far more beneficial for publishers, both large and small, to use HFA because they could save on staff internally. They could use HFA to license all the record companies, however big, however small, and just have Harry Fox collect all the royalties. They would withhold their commission from them and then account to the publishers. But another benefit, back then as well as now, that Harry Fox performs is that part of their service on behalf of publishers is that they will go in periodically, and it's usually once every 2 years, they'll go in and audit the record companies. Because, you'd like to think that you're constantly being paid accurately. Unfortunately, there's a reason why there's a whole division of the music business called auditors, because more often than not, you're not being paid properly. So you need to send in the policeman, and Harry Fox traditionally has been a great sort of, source of that police force to go in and do the auditing, but as things have changed and the mechanical business, as you just said, the CDs aren't selling, like records aren't selling traditionally, so the Harry Fox Agency has had to kind of adapt to that sort of change and offer different services to different entities. So it has changed a little bit. Their commission has gone up a bit from what it was before, but ultimately the function is still the same. Licensed mechanical rights for publishers. It's optional. You don't have to use Harry Fox, but I mean, for a lot of smaller publishers, they feel it's a great resource to just have someone fighting on their behalf, auditing on their behalf, tracking every time they issue a license. Hey, you haven't paid me. What's going on? Let's go. Exactly. So they've really provided a valuable function for decades. Right,
exactly. Okay, so now to the question to kind of conclude this segment. So let's see, what would be a good one for you guys? A simple research question. What I want you guys to do is I want you guys to go to HFA, and I want you to tell us what currently their commission rate is. right? And this is actually a good one. Michael mentioned that there was a commission rate, but it's known to have changed quite a lot, and so where is it now? Just something that you can do to kind of get you to go over to HFA, all right?
So it's harryfox.com.
Okay, good.
It
good.
is HFA, but the website is harryfox.com.
Yeah, so remember that. All right, you guys, we're trying to bake down the basics for you guys so that it sticks. We look forward to doing this next thing. We're going to actually continue with income streams. There's a lot of income streams to discuss, so hang in there.
We'll be right back.